Why is he retiring?
I haven't asked him yet because he's always operating.
Well, I think that
Oh, I should know that. But, I think, look, oh my God. Wow. Why is he retiring?
I think for almost everybody, at some point, you're gonna have to call it a day.
I think it's time now to kind of hang up the professional hat, which is Harlem, and now focus on the things that, he really has wanted to do for a very long time and has been doing, which is giving back.
If he could operate till he was 100 years old, he would. It's a question I'm going to ask him.
I think I can't even say that he's retiring because I know he's still gonna be involved.
I think my dad will never retire.
Okay, let's get.
I think he's gonna keep working till whenever. I think, even if he goes to heaven, he'll still be working there. I just think my dad will never stop working.
So now I'm retiring. And the last month, everybody said I was smiling too much. But as the Nigerian cliche goes, I'm retiring, but I'm not tired.
This is a man that loves what he does. So everybody's question today is, what is he going to do with himself?
Everybody's taken care of, and so I can actually take care of myself. Now I can be a little bit selfish.
A Nigerian was scheduled to speak at an event as the last speaker. So when it came to his turn, finally, he got up to the stage and said, everything that needs to be said about Mr. Okeke has been said, but not everyone has said it.
At an early age, my dad and really spending time with my dad's friends or my parents' friends, I didn't really know specifically that he was a plastic surgeon. I just knew he was a doctor and he operated on people. I think it was completely over my head. But as I got older, and really older, 13, 14, I had a much better sense in terms of the actual details around what he did within medicine.
I'd never thought about it. I mean, once we started taking a look at, how did Dad actually get here? How did the story start, And you realize the sacrifices, that he made.
My parents, obviously, even though they didn't go to school, insisted on getting the best education. And my father decided that I would take only one entrance exam, and I passed it. And I was glad to go to Government College of Umuahia, which is the best school in Nigeria. In the 60s, Kennedy started a scholarship program for West Africa and East Africa for supposedly the best high school students to come here and study in the American universities with the intention that they would be future leaders of Africa and be aligned with the United States. And just think about it, in the 60s, the people still thought that Africa was a jungle, that lions didn't eat us because they recognized us.
That was a special moment, not only, I think, for the presidency, but also in American history, right? Really opening up their doors. Like, we're in an era that happens a lot now. That's almost like international students coming over and studying in, United States schools. But that was really a pioneering kind of situation. And that's kind of what my dad has been. He's always been a pioneer.
You kind of forget the things that he's done just because he's your dad and, came across on a boat, no less.
And that he was no older than, 16, 17 when he came here. And I know what I was doing at 16 and 17. I mean, I certainly didn't have that kind of fortitude, you know what I mean, or that kind of focus and determination. I looked at that picture of the boat and just imagine how he must have felt.
They chartered a boat called the Groote Bear. We spent 9 days on the Atlantic with returning American students. My only problem was before then I had never eaten cheese. And the Dutch like cheese. Before going to the dining room, you had to pass through the pantry and it was all smelling of cheese. So I did not eat for the first half of the trip. I just lived on crackers, but it was fun. And then they sent us to various families. In my case, they sent me to Rockford, Illinois, to spend the summer before going to start school. So it was a wonderful experience. Yeah.
They helped us adjust and integrate into the American society, and it lessened the trauma of being separated from our families in Nigeria.
When you look back on it and you realize, he came from Nigeria to Northwestern alone, this guy in a brand new country, that was a risk.
We met in 1969. There was a war going on in Nigeria. He came from Chicago, right out of medical school, to help heal the wounded during that war.
He really wanted to practice medicine in Nigeria. Relative to the States, I think and at that time, I think the medical system, you could only go so far professionally in terms of, what you could do, what you could achieve.
And he got there and discovered that, it was a tough environment.
The Army was now in charge. There was decreasing funding for the universities and for the healthcare system.
The equipment were not there to do the work with the kind of training that you have. And the hospitals were not set up to do all the things that you wanted to do.
We had crowds of patients coming to the clinic with all kinds of problems, but you couldn't operate on them. You could only do so little. If you've been to Nigeria, there's a lot of women cook on the roadside. They fry all kinds of things. So they have these large pots of really hot oil. And one of them, who was pregnant, slipped and fell into this. And I had about 30% burn from this hot oil. So they brought her to my unit, which is the plastic surgery unit. There were no medicines for the topical care. I had one jar left from what I had brought from the United States. We used it when it finished. That was it. And after a few weeks, they had to do a C-section, bring out the baby, and she went on to pass away. So that frustration, just weighed heavily on all of us.
I would have just closed the door in Nigeria, and I think a lot of people would have done that. But he took a completely different approach.
I spent 6 years there, but it seemed like you could not fulfill your potential.
So we drove to see the hospital in my village. So we got there, the nurse was not there, the doctor was not there, there was no, the place was just a mess. So we looked at the commissioner. He didn't even know that the hospital belonged to the government.
I was planning to travel to the United States, and I had my passport, everything in my briefcase, and I stopped at a shop to buy something. Some thieves broke into my trunk, the trunk of my car, and took the suitcase. And they took the money in it and dropped the suitcase in an abandoned building. One young man found the suitcase and took it to the radio station. All of a sudden, I was in the car. They were announcing Dr. Ofodile come to the. So I went there, and my passport and everything were there except for the money that was there. So I had them call the young man to come and see me in the hospital. So I asked him, "What can I do for you?" He said that the grandmother was really ill and he wanted me to help. So I asked him to bring the grandmother. The grandmother was suffering from cancer. We examined her. We knew what to do, but there were no cancer drugs to treat her. So here was this young man who had done something exceptional for me, and I wanted so much to help him out, and it was hopeless. So after that, I said, it's time to think of alternatives. So.
When you look at the medical systems within the two, the U.S. versus Niger, I think he would have made more of an impact, coming to the States, getting that experience, and certainly, really coming back to Nigeria and sharing that experience and those practices, which is something he has done in terms of coordinating conferences, for example, in Cote d'Ivoire, and bringing doctors and surgeons from far afield. And I think that's something that, had he stayed in Nigeria, he would have been unable to do sort of long term.
The interesting thing was, while I was in Nigeria, I used to still publish in the American Plastic Surgery Journal. And as luck would have it, a group from Harlem Hospital were there, and they saw me and said, we've been looking for somebody to take over the plastic surgery program. Are you interested? I've been looking for a way to come back. I said, of course, but I have to talk to my wife. I have to go back first.
So he came here and said, well, he needed to understand whether he wanted to stay here or move back to Lagos.
So I went back, talked to my wife, and then it took another 5 years for my wife to disengage and join me here.
I have to confess, probably for the first time, to her that without her support and without her being behind me, I probably would not have accomplished all that I've accomplished today. She has been the rock while I've been at Harlem Hospital day and night, and kept the children disciplined. That's why they love me, because I haven't had to discipline them.
When I was 8 and when, I was at that age, my dad was here in New York, practicing medicine and practicing, plastic surgery, while my mom was in Nigeria, raising us. So we were able to kind of go and travel to the States to see my dad. My dad was able to come see us in Nigeria, but this was not every day. This was every couple of months or even less so.
The kids looked forward to going to America for them during the summer and spending their summer months, and got back in September just in time for school to reopen in Nigeria.
It was, your opportunity to do a lot of things in the States that weren't available in Nigeria at the time.
For them, it was an experience. They were very little.
I remember really clearly the time when we were actually moving permanently to the States and that flight and the excitement I had, because there was a couple of things in my mind going on in my mind. It was one, hey, we're going to, the United States, America, this place that has always been a ton of fun because it's always been a really quality time with my dad. But it was also the fact of like, wait, I'm going to now be spending all my time with my dad.
I remember our daughter Uche was very sad. She cried all the way to the airport.
Yeah, I probably was crying. I was really upset, actually. I do remember that. But at the time, I felt so sad about leaving my friends and family, in Nigeria that I was crying. I was crying on the plane. I was trying to figure out a way not to get on the plane. If I could have done that, I would have. But, my mom sort of like made me toe the line and I was on that plane back to New York.
As parents to work together to kind of raise us, to give us an opportunity to have a better life, the opportunity to be in the States, have the whole family together and spend that time with my dad was something that I was looking forward to, even as a young kid like that.
Wow. I've been pinching myself throughout this evening to see whether it's really me that everybody is talking about.
I think it takes time for people to really, come to grips with who you are, what your worth is, what your equity is, and your value to them. And I think when he started, I think that was certainly a very, very challenging thing, both sort of professional, from a professional perspective, because I think people didn't really, believe in the value that he could bring.
In fact, in my class at Northwestern, I was the only black out of 125 students.
He was able to make inroads and accomplish things with race being a much bigger issue back then. We're talking about 60s, 70s, 80s, where having a black physician, a black surgeon was kind of unheard of.
I was going through my mail and I saw a letter I wrote to the president of one of the societies. We had gathered all the names of the black plastic surgeons that we could find in the United States, and there were 50 in the whole United States in 1994.
You need someone who understands, your skin, your body type, and things like that to fully understand like what you're trying to accomplish. I think a really good example of kind of my dad's thought process was the nasal implant that he designed. Because up until that point, it had been a bunch of doctors just saying, all right, well, if you want to have nasal surgery, it's going to just look like my nose. And if there's only like 50 African American doctors, there's not too many people who can really truly understand what an African nose should look like.
I just remember when he started talking about it, and you're kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but he was telling us about this and the fact that he was going to do it, and it just seems so far-fetched. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like you're going to invent something that hasn't been done before, and you're just looking and it's your dad.
If I take an implant designed for your narrow bridge and put it in my wide bridge, it makes it incongruous. It makes the tip look even bigger because you have this narrow bridge and then this place looks so it looks uglier. So we knew we had to change things.
A typical African American patient or a Hispanic patient wasn't really looking for a Caucasian nose. They needed something that was more in tune with their own facial structure.
And people had just accepted what was available. And it's kind of like you're breaking away from the mold to say, actually, we can be better. And we can do something better, and we can make people feel better and look better.
When you read the literature, they referred to black features as negroid features. And And they write all these papers about how to correct the Negroid nose. And the implication was that there was only one type of black nose.
So he spent a lot of time studying the black nose, the Hispanic nose, did a lot of work at the museum looking at all kinds of skulls, just to determine what that ideal African American nose, or what would work best with folks of color.
But we know that there's several types, different combinations, and because the African Americans come from three stock: Indian, Caucasian, and black, all mixed up. Because of the mindset, the Caucasian nose was the standard.
And it kind of just speaks to my dad again, right? He's like, well, something needs to be done. And if no one else is doing it, then, I will certainly lead the way in doing so.
Being the only program in a black institution, we were committed to training more plastic surgeons, and that's what we tried to do. So we at some point, we had trained about 1/10 of all the black plastic surgeons in the country.
He was able to not only be a pioneer in his field, but also be there for us. So he would come home and it would be 8 o'clock. And he's like, all right, let's go over your math homework, right? It would be in this kind of living room area, like living room table. It was just me and my dad. There was like one light on the table. So it felt like an interrogation room. I'm sweating. We're going through all these like math things. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to start really applying myself so I don't have to go through this anymore. So after that, I just started like, all right, I'm going to get my act together and, end up being the president of the National Honor Society in high school, end up going to Columbia, being on the Dean's List student and what have you, and going on to working at ESPN. But it all comes from not wanting to sit on that table with that one light that is staring into me like he was some detective interrogating me on my math homework.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel for the guy because I think I may have put him through the ringer. I mean, I will say this: I tried to push the envelope on a number of occasions, which is interesting. I mean, I think if anyone knows me, I mean, I'm a pretty straight-laced guy. But I think when I was a child, I had a bit of a wild streak.
I guess it's all part of the growing up process. Somebody wanted to go somewhere and he wasn't allowed to go, and he figured, well, I'll find some other way to do this, and jumped out of the second floor window and took off.
I still can't believe I did to this day. I mean, I had a nice, very technical landing. I landed, crouched, rolled. It was fantastic. In retrospect, I probably could have hurt myself pretty seriously. Because usually, we locked the door, we had a nice chain. So before I made my great escape, I unhooked the chain and was planning on just using the key. He may have gone to my room to check on me just to say goodnight or something, and lo and behold, there was no one other than a pillow acting as a body. My dad, being the wise guy, once he caught me, re-engaged the chain.
I've got to do something with this kid. We've got to do something with this kid.
To be fair, it was for a good reason. It was for a nice young girl I was dating at the time. So
When you have children, you develop a sixth sense. So you look in, and if things look too perfect, you know that nobody sleeps on a perfect bed, and so you know that it's set up.
But funny thing is, while my dad did vet out some well-deserved punishment, he also really approached it as an ability to kind of teach a lesson and really talk to me about sort of responsibility, both to yourself and to your folks. I mean, I think his biggest thing was he was just worried that something would happen to me in one of my forays. Yet I still needed to get some of that punishment, though.
I can't remember how old I was. I think maybe I was late 20s. And, I'd been working in different companies, doing different things, but wasn't clear about what I was supposed to be doing. And my dad said to me one day, just write me a letter and tell me where you see yourself in 5 years professionally. And so I sat down, I went home and sat down and wrote him this letter, and I talked about becoming a chief marketing officer in 5 years. And he read it, and I'm sure at the time it seemed absurd because I was not even on this track at all. But his reaction to it was like, you've put it on paper, now try and see how you can make it happen. And actually, I got that job in 4 years. So I think there was something to be said for him kind of forcing me to put my dreams on paper and sort of making me really think about, how to make those dreams happen for me without really being preachy and judgmental.
I was pretty young. I think my brothers and my sisters had already kind of said that they weren't going to be a doctor. So everyone knew that I was the last shot for having a doctor in the family. And, I was very interested. I would say
I used to review my cases in the basement. That's showing the slides of before, sometimes intraoperative pictures, and then the after.
And when I was 8 to 12 maybe, I would join him and get up early and be like, yeah, let's go watch. And I'd be sitting there, watching these surgeries that he was going to be performing. And for a really long time, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to do exactly what my dad does. This is great stuff. Like, he's like saving people's lives, making people feel so much better.
I thought I was going to get him interested in medicine, but obviously some of the bloody pictures turned him off altogether.
Way too much blood for me. And I was like, I can't believe this. I can't do this anymore.
So I pressed him. One day he said, why do I have to be the designated doctor in the family?
So I always joke with him. I'm like, do you kind of wish that we hadn't spent that time watching those videos? Maybe I would have stuck with it. And he's like, at the end of the day, surgery or going into medicine, it's about making a choice, right? I never wanted to push anyone into a particular field. We enjoyed those moments together, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it when you did. But if you don't feel like surgery is for you, then you should do what you feel like you should do.
Don't push it, Elliot.
I'm not coming out there until your eyes are closed.
Okay, they're closed.
I remember when we went to watch E.T., the movie. Every time E.T. came on the screen, they would close their eyes. They were so frightened of E.T. that they couldn't look at the screen. And then they've grown to be all accomplished young men and women. And I don't think I have too much to do with it. I think they have done a lot of this on their own, but I like to take the credit anyway.
Well, we sort of grew up in a very loving environment, and the theme that runs through all our families is you support your kids, you get them through their growing pains, whatever they are, and get them through their educational goals. The kids are, the kids now, big guys and big women, they have all grown up knowing that family is the number one thing in our lives.
I'm always impressed and I'm always shocked. I'm always like, there's no way I can live up to what you've accomplished in your career. Like, you've done so much coming from so little, and I don't know how you were able to sort of raise a family of pretty successful people at the same time. And it's been a marathon that he's been running every mile.
He believes in the goodness of man, And I think that's part of what drives him. He thinks that you can do a lot of good in the world. And because of it, everybody must try to do a lot of good.
When I think about, what I want in terms of my character to come out, I think it's a sense of commitment to any endeavor that I decide to pursue. You don't get to where he is, sort of going, 50% or 60%. I mean, you've really got to commit 100% to your pursuits in order to achieve and accomplish sort of what he's been able to accomplish.
Now that I'm older and seeing what my dad went through, you sometimes don't have that perspective as a child, as a kid, because your parents shield you from so many of their sacrifices and so much of their effort.
I sense that they think so, but I'm not. It's not like an aggressive type of trying to be a role model for them. Yeah, but they see how I function, and obviously they like what they see, so that makes me happy. Yeah, but I don't try to aggressively behave like a role model for, I think it's when it's natural, they just sense it on their own. It means a lot more, yeah.
When I think about my dad, and I think about my parents, my mom, I truly think about the word pioneer. In none of what my dad has done, there hasn't been a playbook that he was able to refer to. There hasn't been a Google Maps. He's had to be a pioneer.
My father is my inspiration. He's one of my best friends, if not my best friend. He's someone that I can have a conversation with about anything at any time. He's just my dad. It's really interesting. He's accomplished so much, but at the end of the day, he's your dad who was there to support you as a little kid, who was there to support you as an adult, who's always proud of the things that you do, even if they don't compare to the things that he's done.
My father, to me, he's my hero. He's not been typical as a father, actually. My dad and I can talk about all kinds of things for hours. He's guided me in my career. He's picked me up when I've been at my lowest. He's just been such a huge supporter of me, and I've never been able to figure out how I can pay him back, for everything that he's done. But he's really my hero, and there's no bigger word I can use than that, really.
It's not often you think about parents, right? You just assume that they're always there, and you never really think about how necessarily on a day-to-day basis how they've influenced your life. So, I think my father, to me, he's my model. He's my benchmark. He's who I hope to be one day, and that's who my father is to me. He's the epitome of I think what a family man should be, and what a man and a professional should be. Just awesome, actually.
It reads, "Goodbye, George Washington Bridge." Hello, MSNBC, Fox News, Talking Heads, all news not fit to watch, 24/7. Thank you very much for being here tonight, for me and for all the good words that you've said tonight.
Give it up for President
I hope I paved a good path for my children, because it makes a big difference for all children. If you have a role model and you have somebody to aspire to, it focuses your direction. And I think that's what I've done for the children. They have been good children, and it gives me pleasure to see them doing well. It's, it's just I a lot of times you don't tell them how good they are. I had an interview, pre-retirement interview, just recently published in one of the online magazines. And somebody read it and wrote back to me, said, you did accomplish all these things and you still brought up perfect children. So for somebody outside to think that your children are perfect, it gives you a lot of satisfaction. I didn't tell them that anybody said they were perfect. I don't want it to get into their heads, but that's true. Somebody actually said it in response to this article that was written about it, that in spite of all the things that we did, we were able to bring up perfect children. And that's all you can say about them. Yeah.